Sure.
So
but then
I think it's fine.
You guys have the, the northern lights of summer, right?
Well, not that far south. Because we're really in the south of Finland, and that happens in the north.
He's not near Santa.
Got it.
Yes, I'm very far from Santa's house.
But you still have some nice long days ahead.
We have nice long days, absolutely. We also get like the snow was super nice because it snowed so much. You really had that winter wonderland look of the branches on the trees were all snowy, and it was sometimes pretty sunny, and the snow was still there. It was wonderful scenery, like dreamlike. It's just that it's good it's like a month or two and not more, because by now it's, I guess I told you that a few weeks ago, literally we don't know where to put the snow. Like the plow, there's a dude with a tractor that comes to plow the snow away from the path.
Like, too much.
and yeah, there's so much of it. At some point it was like, so what do we do with it? Like the where do we put it? There's no place. There's no room.
You need a snow landfill during the winter.
Literally, that's what. And in Helsinki, we went to Helsinki a couple of weeks ago before it started to let up. There was so much snow that they were pushing, on the side of the streets. There were no more places to park. Like literally, let's say a third of the parking spots were now snow piles. And when you have a third of the parking spots that disappear from a city like European city equivalent of eastern cities in the US, it's a problem. You can't park. It becomes chaos. So yeah, that was
that's when you need a Land Rover, and you just drive over the snow and just park on top. All right, well, let's take a break for Daily Tech News Show, shall we? Everyone ready?
Shall we? Yep.
Roger?
Yes.
This is the least convincing yes I heard.
Yes.
He'll do it anyway.
I suppose.
I have a status.
All right, here we go. In 3, 2. Matthew Bradkovich has supported Independent Tech News directly for 5 years. Be like Matthew. Become a DTNS member at patreon.com/DTNS. This is the Daily Tech News for Tuesday, February 19th, 2019. In Los Angeles, I'm Tom Merritt.
And from Studio Feline, I'm Sarah Lane.
And from the slowly thawing fields of Finland, I'm Patrick Beja.
And I'm the show's producer from somewhere in LA County, Roger Chang.
And we are very happy that Patrick is thawed out and ready to talk to us today because we have some news about Google getting into game streaming, which I find quite intriguing, Patrick. And I know you've been following this and can explain it to us.
Absolutely.
All right.
Oh, I can do it now in one sentence.
No, wait. We'll get to it. We'll get to it in a minute. Let's start with a few tech things you should know.
Oh, this is a good one, guys. Samsung's new foldable phone will be called the Galaxy Fold. Surprise! Evan Blass, aka EvLeaks on Twitter, who is very deep in Samsung leaks, reported details about that and the Galaxy S10 family of devices ahead of tomorrow's launch. But Samsung itself ran a TV commercial airing prematurely, supposedly, in Norway that backed up the claims. Among the things shown in the commercial are a hole punch style for the front-facing camera, an in-screen fingerprint reader, and the ability to wirelessly charge another device.
Wait, you said supposedly. Do you think Samsung intentionally leaked this themselves? Because they're like, why not? Evan Blass is going to leak everything anyway.
I don't know. You're right.
No, I think it could be intentional. Everyone's going to be looking forward to it now.
I don't think you can really run a TV ad unintentionally.
Well, there's
so many things to go into.
You, right? I mean,
okay. So my supposedly stands.
Walmart's latest earnings report, U.S. sales up 4.2% over the same time last year, and a 43% rise in e-commerce sales in the U.S., beating analysts' expectations. Walmart said the strong e-commerce growth was due to the expansion of its grocery pickup and delivery businesses and broader offering on Walmart.com.
And follow up to something we talked about on a previous DTNS, Ghostery published a study Friday showing theirs and other ad blocker extensions had sub-millisecond impact on Chrome network requests, using that to dispute the need to change how ad blocking extensions work in Chrome, which had been justified as helping performance. Chrome team has now withdrawn their plans to require extensions to use declarative net request APIs instead of the older web request API. Web request API is going to stick around for now. If you remember, that would have limited or broken how many ad blocking extensions worked. So all that talk that we had ended up with Ghostery convincing Chrome to pull it back, and things are just going to stay for ad blocking extensions the way they have, at least for now. All right, let's talk a little bit about an interesting use of streaming video going on in France, Patrick.
Yeah, a number of French Twitch and YouTube channel producers have banded together to organize Le Grand Débatton, which is a French pun, kind of funny, but anyway, inviting members of the French government to discuss social and political issues with citizens and influencers. The discussions were streamed on Twitch mainly and YouTube and incorporated interactions with chat rooms. The initiative follows the unrest and Gilets jaunes movement and the countrywide Grand Débat that the government is organizing to consult the people over a period of several weeks.
So what's the pun?
That was my question too.
It sounds
what's funny about this that we don't get?
All right, so the Grand Débat is the title of that big debate consultation that the government is putting together, and the verb to debate, when said in the first plural person, is débattons. So that means it's like let's debate all of us together using the basic. It's a pun. You can't explain a pun in a different language.
It doesn't make it funny when you explain it. Trust me, but I get it now. I now understand.
No context.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
So the idea here being that while the government is doing its own events to extend the debate and have discussion about how France should work, this was an effort to kind of bring in younger folks, YouTube creators. What did this end up being?
Yeah, I think what was noteworthy in this, it was 11 hours of debate with members of the actual cabinet of the government. Okay. Not the president himself, but the prime minister also took part in some of it. And the interesting part was that there were a lot of actual content creators from YouTube aimed at young people, some political, some not political at all. There were Twitch streamers and, citizens, students, high school students, etc., etc. And so this is really an effort from what I understand, from those Twitch and YouTube channel producers to get the youth interested in the debate about the future of the country. Now, whether or not it was an exercise in PR for the government, which some people have said, I think the initiative is interesting to go where the young people are.
So on a scale of from hello fellow teenagers to hey, that's cool, where did this fall?
I think the format and the form was very cool, and I will let the substance of it to the appreciation of each person, who will probably appreciate it differently depending on their political leanings. I think the format works surprisingly, and the people who participated in the debate, the creators and citizens, had interesting questions and discussions.
Well, in other news, Amazon's everywhere, but you might not know that it has operated a joint venture in China since 2004 as a way to buy imported goods. Chang reported Tuesday that Amazon is in talks to merge its China business with another cross-border shopping platform called Kaola, run by China's NetEase. Amazon had 6% of China's import shopping business, well behind NetEase's Kaola, Alibaba's Tmail Global, and JD.com. Merging with Amazon would also be a way to boost Kaola's inventory. So it seems like it's a match made in heaven.
Yeah, neither one are commenting on this, but it does. It is interesting because Amazon would still hold a part of this. It's a merger, and they're not selling it off. Amazon already has to operate as a joint venture, as most foreign companies do in China. So it's not like they aren't already involved with a Chinese company. And this would allow the Amazon venture to have access to Kaola's large market share, their leading market share for people looking to shop for imported goods into China. And it would give Kaola access to all those imported goods that Amazon has. Amazon has access to a lot more goods than most Chinese companies. So it does seem like it would be a win-win for these companies within China anyway.
Agreed.
All right.
I was just going to say, I see NetEase, and I think they invest in every game company that I hear of ever, either them or Tencent.
This is their way to stay ahead of, just in case that business is, they've reinvented themselves multiple times, and this is kind of the next step for them, I think. That's a good point. Huawei founder and CEO Ren Zhengfei gave interviews to the BBC and CBS this week. He told the BBC, even if they persuade more countries, they meaning the US, not to use us temporarily, we can always scale things down a bit, saying he doesn't feel like Huawei is under an existential threat. He also said, our company will never undertake any spying activities. If we have any such actions, then I'll shut the company down. He told CBS that it is not possible that the Huawei equipment being used has a backdoor. However, on a separate note, not actually even conflicting with anything that he said, the information reports that its sources say a Huawei engineer met with the maker of a sensor for the Apple Watch in order to press for details on how it was made. The supplier says it did not tell them anything, but the information says that apparently Huawei rewards employees with bonuses pegged to the confidential value of information they collect for the company. Now, Huawei said in response to this that it respects third-party intellectual property and requires suppliers to uphold a high standard of ethics. But it does, to me, Patrick, show that Huawei being accused of spying on governmental accusations, easy for them to defend. They feel comfortable saying, no, we're not doing that. Huawei being accused of intellectual property theft, however, possibly harder for them to deny.
Yeah, I think those are really two very different issues. I would not be surprised if most Chinese companies, and possibly many non-Chinese companies, engage in IP appropriation. I don't want to say theft, but
Nicely put.
and I do believe that it would be an entirely different issue to essentially open a back door for your government. Those are not the same. What the CEO is Ren Zhengfei is saying seems like all the things that he would be saying, except maybe I will shut the company down if we see a backdoor one day. That seems a little bit forceful.
Yeah. When they asked him about connections to the army and the government, he got a little quieter. He deferred a little bit on that. So, it was clear which ones he felt very confident in answering and which ones he would have rather not have been asked. The Chinese trade minister is coming to Washington, D.C. later this week to discuss trade negotiations. It's no accident that he is out here doing this campaign right now, because I do think that there's a trade gambit going on that's part of this, and accusing Huawei of government cooperation is an easy one to sell to the public and get people upset about, even if it's something that is less possibly true than good old-fashioned third-party intellectual property theft, which would be something you would negotiate in a trade negotiation. You want to whip up the public sentiment, even if you're using it to fix a different problem.
Which means we still don't know, I suppose.
Right. If I'm reading the tea leaves, the U.S. is going to come in and say, hey, you stop giving your employees bonuses for stealing sensor tech from U.S. companies, and we have a basis for an understanding here. I don't think they're as worried about backdoors in those negotiations as they are in public.
At this point, I do feel like letting up on that accusation would be difficult. If all of a sudden they say, hey, we've negotiated a trade deal and we have agreements and now everything's fine, go ahead, use Huawei equipment, it would discredit future accusations
or
of.
would it? Or do you say,
I
and we
think it
got
would.
assurances from them during these negotiations that there aren't any backdoors, and we feel confident in that? I think that's
Yeah, I feel like assurances that there aren't any wouldn't be good enough.
I don't know. And UK are saying they're fine with using Huawei equipment. It does
Yes.
look like Germany might agree. So, you know, there's a little leverage slipping there too.
I will say that the British did say it was manageable, not that
Manageable. Yeah, no, that's the direct quote. You're right.
Well, here's something that we do know for sure. Qualcomm announced the Snapdragon X55 5G modem, a follow-up to the first 5G modem, the X50. Qualcomm will begin to share the chip with its partners in the coming months, with first devices shipping before the end of the year, according to Qualcomm. The Snapdragon X55 has a theoretical maximum of 7 gigabits per second compared to 5 gigabits for the X50. It also has support for adaptive antenna tuning for its sub 6 gigahertz 5G, which helps power efficiency, at least in theory. And Qualcomm says that the X55's flexibility should make it easier and a better fit for devices beyond smartphones and Wi-Fi hotspots.
A great example of why you shouldn't buy first generation equipment, right?
Yeah, X50. We now have a better one.
X50 is okay. The X55, it's going to be more compatible. It's going to have better speed. It's also another interesting point about it is it's going to be more useful for non-phone devices, for things like cars and other sort of Internet of Things type devices that are big enough to take advantage of a big modem like this. But it's going to be a little better architected as well.
It feels like in this case, if you had already bought, or if you are now buying a device that is 5G compatible, it is really that you want to future-proof it because you don't want to buy another one within, 5 years. There is no 5G network anywhere.
No.
Almost.
Yeah. No, if you're buying a 5G modem right now for that reason, don't, because that's not going to be future-proof.
Well, I mean,
the X50 is okay, but it's not going to work nearly as well as the X55, which you can get later this year.
Yes, and the networks aren't. I'm guessing if you have to buy something now, and you're thinking, well, 5G is going to happen at some point, I'd better get that one. But yes, it's not the best one you can get.
Yeah,
at the point that the 5G networks are.
It's because you just need or want to have it now.
Want is more likely, and that's where we get into the maybe you shouldn't.
Yeah. For sure.
Engineers at Rochester Institute of Technology have designed a toilet seat that can measure your stop giggling. It's serious.
Sorry, I've been waiting for this story this entire time. Okay, keep going.
The toilet seat that can measure your blood pressure, blood oxygen level, and stroke volume every time someone sits on it. The engineers say it needs more testing, but so far it stands up to comparable hospital equipment like standard ECGs. Another problem to address is how to discard readings from when a user is actually using the toilet rather than just sitting, which can affect readings. If you're wondering why we have avoided the obvious puns in explaining this story, is because the incomparable Beth Mole used them all in the article for Ars Technica.
It's glorious. You must read Beth Mole's article. We have a link in the show note. Go to arstechnica.com. I mean, the way she executed the use of the word privy in this article is just, it's a masterstroke, really.
Well, and it's interesting to, understand that the toilet is trying to discern from, are you just sitting on the toilet or are you actually using the toilet? And when does anyone sit on the toilet when they're actually not using the toilet?
Well, I mean, that's a delicate way of saying there's when you're sitting and then when you're actually like but engaged in the activity that, in other words, when you're sitting waiting to go, that is okay reading. When you're actually in the process of doing the things that you need to do on the toilet.
Right.
When you're pooping or peeing.
Pressures might be a little bit different. Yeah.
Tom is trying to say when you're pooping or peeing. It's fine. We're adults. We can say poo and pee.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's toilet stuff. My whole thing is just like, I just, if I want the toilet to measure me and it's doing a great job at doing it, wonderful. But you don't want to sit on a toilet unless
No.
You
I
have
don't
to
think
be
this is
there.
like, okay, you have to go sit on the toilet now to take your heartbeat. This is taking advantage of the fact that there is some downtime between the time you sit
Well,
and
I
the
think it
time
depends on the person.
you execute.
You know,
There's
I mean,
some.
some of us are 30 seconders.
You don't need a lot. Okay, you just need some.
Right.
And in cases, especially in hospitals where people might not be able to wear a sensor, and it would just be more convenient to have more frequent readings because that's something that a person would be going to do, unless they're of course bedridden.
Yeah, I think this is we're joking because it's a joke easy topic, but the goal is that you kind of don't need to worry about it. If it works the way it's supposed to, you just use the toilet as you would a few times a day, and you don't worry about it, and it takes your readings. So that's useful in that sense.
The worry is on the part of the scientists who are researching this to figure out, like, how do we make sure that we discard the useless data?
Exactly.
There is some data that's polluted in there. And we need to make sure we don't let that affect the other readings. So. Hey, folks, if you want to get all the tech headlines each day in about 5 minutes to keep up to date quickly, subscribe to our sister show, dailytechheadlines.com, and you will feel more up to date. All right, Google sent out a press invite today to its keynote at the Game Developers Conference March 19th. That's not that big a deal. Google's always at the GDC. They always have some things to say, usually developer-oriented, because, hey, it's a Game Developers Conference. But this invite was intriguing people because it said, like, you know, some vague things that sort of alluded that they might have more to say this time than usual. Well, sources are telling Fortune that the event will include the announcement of the launch of Project Stream. Project Stream is Google's, up till now, in development game streaming service, and all you can play cloud-based video game subscription service. So you'd pay a certain amount of money, probably a month. You'd get access to a bunch of games that they have the rights to, and then you could play them on any device. This is very similar to PlayStation's service, the Shadow service that Patrick has talked about. Also, Fortune notes that we do have some rumors out there that Verizon, Apple, and Amazon are all expected to get into the same business here as well. And Patrick, this has been your beat. You know, you talked to us and introduced us to Shadow. You talk quite a bit on your shows, like Pixel and Monthly Video Game Briefing, about these streaming services. It does seem like we're hitting a new phase in this if Google gets into it.
This could be the start of the realization of this potential. We've been talking about game streaming for a very long time. In the past couple of years, it seems like every company, gaming company, is investigating this possibility. And it has stayed kind of vague or futuristic for a few years. Now, Google has tested it with Assassin's Creed Odyssey at the end of last year, if you remember, in a partnership with Ubisoft. And I honestly didn't think it was going to be ready to announce anytime soon. But if they do that, if they end up announcing it with a relatively quick release date, availability date, it would be important for two things. First, it actually starts the massive commercial offensive of the service, and it puts Google, which is not primarily a gaming company, in direct competition with all of the platform holders, meaning PlayStation, Nintendo, and Xbox now have a competitor which doesn't even require you to own the device, and that could be industry changing.
Yeah, and it would put the marketing muscle behind it, right? Because you've convinced me that the Shadow service is a pretty good service, but I know a lot of people have questions about it. It isn't scaling the same as a cloud service because you're not just going into the cloud, you're getting access to an entire machine, right?
Yeah, the Shadow service is really apart from all of the other ones. All of the ones that we are hearing about just offer game streaming. So you log in and you can choose the game you stream and you stream it. The Shadow service gives you access to a PC in the cloud. So you can do whatever you want with the PC. And I actually went and tested it again. I've been testing it here and there for a couple of years since its launch, maybe even 3 years now or 4. And I am in Finland. The servers are in France, so it is far from an ideal situation. But the game I was testing is Overwatch, which is a first-person shooter, requires very fast action. I'm not going to tell you it ran as well as the one that I had on my computer, but it was playable. And for a game, it's the most lag-dependent type of game you can imagine. And it was definitely playable across the vast divide between France and Finland. So that to me says these services have matured. The Shadow service is one of them, and they are now becoming real. And if Google indeed announces it, that will be day one of the era of game streaming services being an actual reality. I'm not even counting, things like OnLive that did exist and PlayStation Now that does exist, because those were always kind of side projects or things that might have worked technically, but commercially didn't have the kind of offerings you would want for various reasons. So this could be the start.
Yeah, I'm tempted to make, comparisons to previous product lines, like, there were smartphones and then the iPhone came and everything changed, or there were desktop operating systems that had Windows and then Windows came and everything changed. So, this does feel like the moment when the big guys are going to get in. Is this the kind of situation where if you're Apple, Amazon, Google, or even Verizon, you have enough muscle to make this popular, where even if the existing options are superior, you can market against them and get all the users?
Well, the big advantage of this type of service is that the onus of equipment is not on the end user. It's on the company, meaning you don't need a console. You don't need a powerful PC. You don't need anything. You could do this on a phone. You could do this on a TV screen. You just launch the app or the service and you're playing immediately. So there is no barrier to accessing that service in a way that is very different from what has been the case until now for most gaming services. So this is a long way of saying anyone could potentially become the distributor of games in a very easily accessible manner. Verizon, Apple, Amazon, anyone who has the technology could potentially compete in that area. So, and this is very not damaging, but this is a dangerous situation for the established major players in that industry.
Yeah. I mean, it's companies that have good cloud services and robust networking. Amazon, Google. I mean, you can argue about Apple and iCloud, but they've been doing it for a while. So they certainly have the infrastructure for it. Verizon is a carrier, right? They certainly have the infrastructure for it. So yeah, it makes sense that they would want to get in there. Where a company like Sony isn't a networking company, isn't a cloud services.
Yes.
So yeah.
In that game, Sony probably has the least technical capabilities. It seems they are ramping them up, as they probably should, but Microsoft is much better positioned for that. Yeah. I will also add that, of course, not everyone is going to be able to enjoy those services, as I always say this. But the fact that not everyone, someone will tell us, well, I only have ADSL. Clearly, you're not in the best position for this. But many people will be able to take advantage of them. And the fact that you can't play every game doesn't mean that you can't play any game. So the ease of access can be interesting in some cases. And that might be a big enough market that some companies will take advantage of it.
Very good.
Thanks to everybody who participates in our subreddit. Speaking of taking advantage of the cloud, we're our own little cloud. Submit stories and vote on others at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com. We're also on Facebook, facebook.com/groups/dailytechnewsshow. And we also have Nate Langson back with a short preview on the next text message podcast special, Weird Farm Stuff Edition. Go.
Thanks, guys. This week you can join me as I explore a dairy farm in rural Ireland and find out how facial recognition technology for cows works. That's right, for cows. We also explore a UK startup that's made a version of Tinder for farmers looking to breed their livestock. And just to prove we're not normally talking about weird farm stuff on this show, we also have the CEO of Patreon, Jack Conti, on to shed some light about what's next for the company keeping Tom and I in business. That's all in episode 158 of Tech's Message, available now at techpodcast.uk or wherever you get your podcasts. And hey, happy President's Day, America.
Oh, thank you, Nate.
Oh, thanks.
I part of my President's Day was enjoying this very moving episode of Text Message.
Ooh, very nice.
All right, enough of that. Let's check out the mailbag.
Let's do it. Rob from Ramstein AFB wanted to ask Patrick specifically, because he's on the show on Tuesdays, about 5G in Europe. Rob says, Patrick, I know you haven't talked about this in a few weeks, but I figured since the resident socialist is on today, what's the situation in Europe in regards to 5G? I've just moved to Germany from the States, so I know I'm going to miss out on the initial rollout at least for a few years. If I remember correctly, 4G came to Europe later than the States, but ended up being faster. Do you think it will be the same case over here?
So is Rob, are you talking about 5GE or actual 5G? Because that, I'm confused now with what you do. 5G is following
Let's
the
call
same...
it 5G for the purposes of
right. So I think it's following the same kind of schedule roadmap as 4G was, the comparison between the two, meaning it's going to come a little bit later, maybe 6 months to a year, but it's actually going to work. So, that's what we have going for us.
And I think those time gaps feel bigger in the few months when they are happening. We're not talking years here. I remember covering for ZDTV Radio, I guess it was Tech TV Radio by then, the rollout of 3G in Europe and how we weren't getting it here in the States. And Europe was way ahead of us. And eventually we got it, and then it felt like there really wasn't a difference. LTE kind of felt the same way. It was weird that one time I went to Europe and they didn't have LTE yet, and I did back in the States. Those things generally pass, and then you reach a sort of parity. So I don't know that it makes much of a difference.
It doesn't really. I mean, we're starting the tests now, at least in France, in a few cities, and then the more generalized rollout will happen soon after. It's also, when it's rolled out in the US, it's so big that it's rolled out in 2 or 3 cities, and the rest of the country doesn't have it. Usually the people reporting on it are in San Francisco. So it feels like they all have it and they're all super, but the rest of the country often doesn't have it yet. So that plays a role as well.
Well, thanks, Rob, for the feedback and the question for Patrick Beja. And also on the subject of Patrick Beja, thanks, Patrick Beja, for being on the show with us. We know that you are keeping warm in Finland, but besides that, what else is going on and how can people keep up with your work?
There are a couple of things you could do. If you enjoy gaming, you could go listen to Pixels, the latest episode of which in which we talk about Tetris 99, which is a battle royale Tetris, the most incredible thing that was announced last week. It took the world by storm, and we talk about a bunch of other things, the Activision Blizzard layoffs and the rocky launch of Anthem, among other things. You can also listen to the monthly video game briefing, which I do with Scott Johnson, which is an offshoot of the Daily Tech News Show. It's a monthly show, and we talk a little bit more to the casual audience. You don't need every single detail of every game coming out. Maybe that show is for you. So Pixels on the one hand and MVGB on the other.
Get the complete video game picture. Both. Hey, our goal each month is to get one more patron than last month, and you could be that person that puts us over the edge. If you haven't become a member of DTNS, you're missing out. There's cool stuff in there that you can get in an RSS feed. I think a lot of people don't realize, I don't have to go to a separate website to get the things. You can get an RSS feed from Patreon when you're a member of DTNS that will give you all of the cool DTNS audio right in whatever podcatcher you are using. So for instance, today, if you're a member, you got an update from Shannon Morse from ThreatWire about some Android vulnerabilities that happened over the last week. There's all kinds of cool stuff like that showing up at patreon.com/DTNS. Go sign up right now.
And if you have feedback for us, we want to hear it. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. We're also live Monday through Friday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 21:30 UTC. I'm still waiting for us to change the UTC part of it. Find out more at dailytechnewsshow.com/live.
Back tomorrow with Scott Johnson. Talk to you then.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Oh, how many cow and or toilet puns are in our title suggestions?
Let's see.
Actually, the top vote getters right now are Daily Toilet News Show, of course.
That is not.
No.
I mean,
and
that makes it sound like our content is bad.
yeah, but
Yes,
you had to
exactly.
expect that, right?
Right.
Not saying we're going to use it, but okay. Yeah, no.
Got it.
And it's funny in French.
I like it's punny in French. Even better.
Ooh.
How do you spell
From
punny
BioCow.
in French? Punny. There's also health data dump.
Mm-hmm.
That works, but
An
Would be
Amazon
puns.
merger with NetEase. Get it? Because it's easy. Our Way or the Huawei. We've had that one before. No qualms with 5G. Qualcomm has no qualms with 5G.
I think we gotta go toilet, guys.
Tinder for
I
cows,
don't know if
News
Daily
Lab.
Toilet News Show is right, but maybe health data dump.
Or well, it's punny in French. Yeah,
I like it punny in French.
it actually
one's
kind
fun.
of crosses some of the barriers.
All right, I'm gonna vote for that one.
Smarter crapper, polluted data.
Oh.
Flushing away bad medical information. Yeah. All right. It's punny in French. It's punny in French.
In French. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So
Patrick, what's the equivalent en français for saying something is punny?
we don't really have. I guess it's a jeu de mots, a play on words, but it doesn't quite.
It's not the same.
Express the sub.
Right. Because saying something's
section
punny
of
is
play
sort
on
of
words.
like it's stupid. But
Yes.
we recognize that
clever,
it's funny also. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we don't really have that equivalent.
So no one put in pot pulse.
Hmm?
Get it? Pot pulse.
Oh,
There's
because
no
you're
pot.
sitting on the pot.
Yeah,
and
pot
sticking your
pulse.
pulse.
Ah, the pot pulse.
The old pot pulse.
Sounds a little, it's a lot of details.
In this world of legalization, can bring up the wrong.
True.
Yeah. That just says slow pulse to me. Like,
Right. Oh, the old pot pulse.
yeah, that'll get rid of your anxiety.
Right. Sit on the pot. Figure out if you're about to have a stroke.
Number 2 with a score.
Oh no.
Now we're talking.
Now.
Yeah.
Okay.
The thing about socialism I wanted to say, but
Oh,
found
right.
it didn't quite fit in the episode.
Okay.
We actually talked about it on the latest special for the Phileas Club with Saul, who was talking about Venezuela and what's happening there. And we were talking about socialism. And he made the very apt remark that socialism includes so many different things nowadays that it kind of doesn't make sense because, you have Cuba and socialist and communist Russia and all of those, and you have it all the way to like northern countries in Europe and France and all of those countries that have nothing to do with communism. So the fear, quote unquote, of socialism is kind of weird because the word doesn't really mean a
been
specific thing.
stretched a lot. Yeah.
Well, it's a catch-all phrase for things that you don't like, and it's an unfortunate way that people use
In the
it.
U.S., I think.
In the U.S. it is. Yeah.
It is, but
In
it's
other
ironic.
parts
I mean, it
world,
depends on who you're talking to. In the
Well,
US.
in the world, it's
Well,
not used as a pejorative. It's a perfectly acceptable like appellation for a political
Sure.
party.
Mm-hmm.
Not controversial in any way.
No, I think a lot of people would argue, there's socialist-inspired ideas that are implemented in social democracies, and that works really well. But
this is the truth of the matter. All countries, on some level, share facets of whether it's socialism, capitalism. I mean, it just depends really on the makeup. There is no pure socialistic country and there's no pure capitalistic country.
And I think that goes along with what Patrick's saying, which is the name could mean something as centrally planned as the Soviet Union or Cuba, to as free market as Scandinavian countries, where there's a certain amount of state involvement that really isn't unusual. It's all the same kinds of things we have in the United States. They're just implemented in a different way.
I mean, we call them farm supports, but no one goes screaming that communism is encroaching.
It's kind of a bankrupt term.
Yeah, definitely.
And if you're using it in a legitimate argument where you want to learn from each other, it's probably not terribly helpful. Although I think, to Rob, our emailer's defense, when he said the resident socialist, Patrick, you've called yourself that mockingly, like self-deprecating.
No. Yeah, he certainly wasn't saying that in a way of being like,
he was.
No, of course.
No,
I agree. It's just, I say it in a self-deprecating, quote unquote, way because a lot of my American friends and the American context seems to ascribe a negative value to the word socialist and socialism, and so it's like, haha, I was socialist, but really I kind of am partly a socialist because I believe in some of the things and I don't think that's a bad thing, like healthcare and things.
Also, in France, as you have mentioned on Phileas Club many times, you are not considered on the left side of the aisle.
Ooh, no, not at all. Not at all. On the world stage, I would proudly call myself, defender of some socialist values, but in France, I am a horrible capitalist.
Yeah,
I think
it's just all contextual. It's funny. Myself in France, I'm considered someone who's never been there before. I haven't been there.
Have you ever been to France?
Have you never been to France?
No.
Tom Merritt.
Patrick has met my wife in Paris.
I have.
And hung out with her there. I've never been to France.
We drank wine and ate cheese in Paris, like 500 meters from the.
Wow. I mean, you've got to go to Paris.
I know.
My goodness gracious. You can go wherever you want, but
sure.
It's just world's best city.
It's not through some choice of like, no way am I going to France.
It just didn't happen.
No way am I going to socialist France?
I have been in Paris with Eileen as well. You weren't there because it was a work trip, but like it just like I'm
50% of the
I'm rocked by this news.
I've been to Paris with my wife. I am not one of them.
Wait, Sarah. Was it the time that I met Eileen? Was it the same time?
I don't know. This would probably have been in 2011 for the web.
It probably was.
Yeah. Why didn't I meet you?
We could have all been eating cheese and drinking wine together.
Opportunities missed.
Those are two things I probably couldn't indulge in.
Roger's like, I wouldn't even want to go. I don't like cheese and I don't like wine.
Tom knows what happens when I drink wine. And depending on the cheese, I may or may not have a reaction to it.
That's okay.
Well,
you can just have the pate.
Yeah. I think we are now establishing the fact that we should do the next
convene on Paris.
In Paris.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh man. I haven't been to Paris in I think about 3 to 4 years now. And I used to go every year. I mean, it is my favorite city ever
Eileen's been
in the entire world.
Eileen had been there when I met her. And she's been there like 3 or 4 times since we got together.
Right.
And I never go.
And
she's always going for work, but it's not work that I'm involved in.
Patrick, I'm curious. Like, when people say like, oh, Paris, the best city ever, like you obviously go back and forth, but you live in a different country now and being a French origin. Do you feel like it's like this like wonderful romantic place that the rest of us do, or is it a little bit more kind of pedestrian?
Well, I mean, I think I don't. When I think of Paris, I don't imagine, stone paved streets with accordion sounding in the background like many American
Sure.
people do.
Yeah, it's not
Mimes,
Amelie.
arm in arm.
Yeah.
with
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But certainly it is a really nice city, and there are some exceptional places. I walk around in other cities, and it's just, even this is going to sound incredibly like chauvinistic, but there are some places, not everywhere in the city, but in some places, some parts of Paris, it's just, there's nothing like it. You go to the Louvre, you go
I don't
to
think that
some of
sounds
the,
chauvinistic.
Yeah.
That's,
No, it's,
that's
It's
just
provincial, I think. the term.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
and when you go across the Pont des Arts at night, or go at the Louvre and have the part of it, like you see it open in front of you when you cross the threshold of that part of the thing, it's like, it's incredible. And
It is.
yes, it is definitely an exceptional city. There are many exceptional cities, but that one has a special soul, I feel. So I guess, yes, also there are some kind of crappy things, but there are some really good things.
Well, and I know why you're sort of apologizing, because you're like, but I'm from there, so maybe I'm biased, right? Like, I get that. But I think every city has something special, and also has something that's not so great. And certainly, I've been to enough other cities. I've been to London, I've been to Tokyo, I've been to Seoul, I've been to Barcelona, that I know that, like, some cities do have more special things than others, and some have more of the rotten things than others. And
Right. And there are certain things that speak to you
yeah, right.
rather than
Yeah.
rather than others. And it depends
London,
on who you
I
are.
love London.
I
London just
love
speaks to
London.
me. I feel at home when I'm in London, but I know not everyone is like that. And
No,
there's-
no. In fact, I know people who dislike London.
Yeah, and I can
Because
understand
it's
the
just
things
not
they
it's not their bag.
It just doesn't bother me. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
what was the
will
title?
say, I honestly think
What's
that
that, Roger?
Oh, sorry. I need to know what we picked for the title.
It's in the doc, line 1.
I will say, I
there it
do
is.
honestly think, if I'm trying to be objective, which I can't, about Paris, but it has, I would argue, more special than most other cities. It has
It's a
a
magical city. It is.
yeah.
It is.
It's yeah.
My problem is it's full of French people. Otherwise, I'm sure I'd love it.
That's what most
Ah
people
ouais.
say about their own city, but definitely in Paris, you will very often say, from Parisians, the saying that the only problem with Paris is that it's full of Parisians. And I also subscribe to that idea.
I have to say, like, there's also the difference between living somewhere. I never loved Los Angeles. I was prejudiced against it till the first time I visited it. The first time I visited it, I was like, oh, it ain't so bad. I'd never want to live here, but it's kind of fun to visit. And that was my opinion of LA for the longest time. Then we moved here, and now I'm like, you know what? There's some pretty great things about this city that nobody knows about. Because there are also some really awful things about this city, but you can easily avoid a lot of those really awful things. Not all of them, but you can find a niche. And I think that's one of the things about Los Angeles I undervalued until I lived here was how you can find the good things easier than in say San Francisco or Austin, where I've lived before, where it's like you kind of got what it was. You got the good and the bad of what it was. I feel like Los Angeles is a little more flexible than other cities.
Well,
and I don't say that as a
also-
comparison to Paris. I mean that when you live in a
Right.
place, you find out things about it that you wouldn't know otherwise.
I've lived
Totally.
in a few different cities in a few different countries, and Paris is special. I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. I agree with you. Every time I go there, I'm like,
There you
why
go.
don't I
Listen-
live here?
Yeah,
Listen
but
to
you have
Sarah.
a connection to it that other people may not have, and so
Yeah.
it's part and parcel of
I
how
mean,
you
it's-
were raised and the context in which you were raised in that city.
Parisians aside, pretty great city. And even then, it's like you just get used to them being like, we don't care about you, you damn tourist. And then you all coexist fine.
And having lived in San Francisco, I respect that.
Exactly.
You know,
right?
Paris is the most touristy city in the world. It's literally the one that gets the most tourists. And you get used to it. You what?
I said, not this one. Yet. Anyway. All right. Thanks everybody for watching our video. I hope you enjoyed it. We are going to switch over to just our audio on Discord for the Patreon members. But thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you again tomorrow. Audio folks, stick around. There's more to come.